This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. This is a song my father taught me and my brother when I was about 4 years old. In fact, I have a recording of that. My father used to record me and my brother Phil. And it was important to my dad to teach us that song and other American folk songs because he wanted us to know that we were American and that we belonged here. And my parents had complex identities like most Mexican Americans. They liked Billie Holiday and Vicente Fernandez. They liked Glenn Miller and Trio Los Panchos and Edie Gourmet. At Thanksgiving, my family ate turkey dinner with enchiladas, pumpkin pie, and capirotada. At those Saints parties, my uncles would bring their mariachis, and I would play with them. And me and my brother Phil would sing David Bowie and James Taylor songs. Some of those David Bowie lyrics are a little bit nasty for kids, you know, now that I think about it. But why is it necessary for me to even say this? Because in our own country, Mexican Americans are often treated as if we are either invited guests or enemy invaders, but that we don't fully belong. I grew up in Glendale, California, which was at that time a very white, very conservative town. In the 60s, it was the headquarters for the American Nazi Party, and it was a sundown town up until the late 1960s. For some reason, I don't think there were enough Mexicans in the neighborhood really to pose any kind of threat. Me and my brothers were fine. We had lots of friends. We had good schools. Of course, there were a few incidents here and there. One in particular, my brother Philip, when he was in elementary school, they had a flag patrol where the little boys would form like military formation and march out with the flag, California flag and the U.S. flag to put it up the flag post. Left, right, left, right, left, left. And the old men in the neighborhood would gather around the perimeter to salute. And in retrospect, I can only imagine that some of these men were veterans of World War I. Well, one day after flag patrol, my brother Phil came home and he asked my dad, "Dad, what's the Alamo?" My dad said, "Why are you asking me about the Alamo?" He said, "Well, when I was on flag patrol, an old man saw me and he yelled out, 'Remember the Alamo!'" And my dad was pretty pissed off. A few years later, I was in high school. I got a job at the Alpha Beta grocery store. Somebody's applauding for Alpha Beta grocery store. I was the bag boy, but I got promoted to a checker, which was pretty unusual for a high school kid. I worked really hard. And one night I was the only check stand open, and this white man refused to let me check his bags. So I called the manager, and he told me to step aside. And he let the man, he checked the man's bags. Well, this was a surprise to me, because it's something that my parents would never have permitted. A few years later, I ended up attending UC Santa Cruz, liberal UC Santa Cruz, where I discovered a whole other kind of discrimination. The kind that tolerates you and celebrates you as long as you conform to a stereotype. I call it the "it's a small world" version of multiculturalism. I took a mariachi ensemble at the musicology class. And the teacher was this Irish-American fellow who seemed to really identify with these stereotypes of Mexican machismo. And he would have us students stand like, as he would say, real Mexicans. And this man thought he was more Mexican than his Mexican-American students. And he would get frustrated with me because I wouldn't comply. And he even told friends of mine that I was ashamed to be Mexican. A few years later, I started a youth group called Los Cenzontles, which means the mockingbird, which is the bird of 400 voices, and eventually a nonprofit. We teach kids our deepest traditions but not in a way to be chauvinistic, not in a way to confine their identities, but as another part of them. Our traditions were born of our resilience and our resourcefulness. And we're not telling our kids who they are. It's just one more piece of information for them to make choices as they go through life. And we never asked anybody's permission to do this. We just did it. When we needed a space, about 9 years into our formation, we took over an ex-liquor store on San Pablo Avenue. We had no budget. We had no capital campaign. But we had a lot of volunteers, we had a lot of kids, we had a lot of parents, and we created this beautiful space. When we couldn't get gigs, nobody would hire us for gigs, we built the stage. We didn't need to get gigs, we had our own stage. When record companies didn't want to make records of our music, or filmmakers didn't want to do films about us, no problem. We had our own studio, we have our own video. I trained our own teachers, and I trained our own staff. And 35 years later, we have 35 albums. We have 20 documentaries. We have hundreds and hundreds of music videos. We've trained thousands of children. And we have collaborated with many wonderful Mexican folk artists, as well as Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Brown, Taj Mahal, Ry Cooder, the Chieftains, Preservation Hall, Lalo Guerrero, Flaco Jimenez, and many more. So after all these accomplishments, you think, wow, it's going to be easy to raise money now for our work. 2015 comes around, and we see the rise of the far right. That began with the denunciation of Mexicans as rapists and murderers and invaders to the country. In my own street, in front of my own house at that time, an old white guy, drunk on booze and Fox News, took a swing at me, calling me an illegal alien, in front of my own home. And on the other side, we are confronted with something they call DEI, in which my accomplishments don't matter anymore. The breadth of my culture does not matter anymore. We are simply a box to be checked, so that someone can decide whether I am to be included. My grandparents came to this country 100 years ago. My father's father was born in Arizona before Arizona was a state. I don't see where any group in this country, any one group, has the right to tell any other group who's included and who's not included. My grandparents didn't ask to be included, and I'm not going to ask to be included because I belong here. At our academy, we teach our children that they are stewards of our space. And being a steward comes with privilege and it comes with responsibility. At the beginning of class or before an event, they pull out chairs, and at the end, they put them away. They're going to go through life being, quote unquote, the scholarship student, being treated as the beneficiaries of someone's benevolence. But I want them to know that they belong here, because I believe that a just society is founded on the idea that everybody who contributes is a mutual steward. This is what my parents taught me. This is what my grandparents taught me, my guardian angels. This land is your land. This land is my land. California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of the diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. Maybe you can join me for this last one. This land is your land. This land is my land. From Gracias.